You have the early adopters, you have the bleeding edge kind of people, and then you have the laggards. And, as Clayton Christensen has always said, there will always be those that will do the disrupting, and then there will be those that will be disrupted.
Welcome to Process Pioneers, the show that takes a deep dive into the minds of decision makers, key influencers, and process experts who are pioneering the world of everything process.
Welcome to another episode of Process Pioneers. My name is Daniel Rayner. I'm the host of Process Pioneers. And in each of these episodes, I get the absolute privilege of sitting down with a number of people in different organizations, and we talk about the topic of business process management or anything to do with process, whether it's talking with a process improvement specialist, whether talking with an external consultant that works with a range of organizations, whether it's talking to academics or researchers. We're talking about this topic of process and why is it valuable for organizations to understand, to manage, and to improve. And today I have the absolute privilege to sit down with Karina Honey. Now, Karina is currently the acting ICT Director at Resources Safety Health Queensland, and she's also worked at a number of Australia's largest organisations, including Flight Centre, UQ, and I've seen that you've also worked at Boeing there for a stint. But I'm really excited for our conversation today, Karina. Thanks for joining me.
No, thanks, Daniel. Thanks for having me. It's great to have an opportunity to share some of the scars and the fun journeys that I've had along the way.
That's great. And I think that's where the value comes in, is being able to learn from people that have gone through challenges and hurdles and battles and have come through the other side. And, those are the most valuable lessons, is when you've come through those different obstacles and things like that. But one thing I wanted to, draw the audience's attention to is that currently, the area of process that you're quite interested in at the moment is blockchain and process, and how blockchain is a process, and that link or that distinction there. So maybe if you want to start off, because we've got a range of people listening to these episodes, and they may not all have, explored what blockchain is and how that is a process and how that links to the way an organization delivers value. So talk to us about what is blockchain and how does it tie to the topic of process?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there would be value probably sort of giving a brief 101, because I know when someone goes to me, oh, what is your PhD in? And I say blockchain, and they go, huh? So the reality of blockchain is that, in my world, I see it's a widespread, but the use of the word blockchain is used quite broadly.
Right.
So blockchain is that architecture that sits underneath the Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency in the world today. At the moment, 2,000 plus cryptocurrency coins or tokens of types. That's probably even more growing. And so underneath that, there is certain cryptographic consensus algorithms and settings that are made that constitute what's called a blockchain. Simply put, lots of transactions are bundled together on a block. These are hashed cryptographically, linked together, that then causes it, enables an ability to go back. So if anybody goes back to alter a transaction, it is tamper evident. And you actually, depending on the consensus algorithm, to change a transaction means you have to actually convince 51% of the network of that change. So that to where and why is it getting used in other spaces other than money? So the financial industry has embraced it quite wholeheartedly. They're looking at it in the worlds of settlement. So things like transfers of currency from one country to another can happen even with Bitcoin and its technology being quite slow. It's quick when you compare it to SWIFT payments, right? So that can take, if you wanted to send payments to the UK, it might take a week before it landed in your friend's bank account, right? Whereas doing it and sending it through Bitcoin, or a like platform, settlement platform, could take a matter of seconds, or it take an hour, depending on the consensus algorithm. So that gives you a lot of efficiencies, and hence that's why everybody's looking at for in sense of process improvement. Where can we get these efficiencies in the process? Where can we cut out all these middle people, intermediaries, and all that we use to establish trust? So, for example, another company, Bureau Veritas, they're a very well-known third-party trust provider. They provide certificates for people to prove the authenticity of where something has gone along in the supply chain. So Bureau Veritas are actually implementing blockchain technology for tracking and tracing supply of tuna. Right. So then, if you go to a particular restaurant in Japan and you say, where did this tuna come from, you can, I don't know, not quite scan a QR code on the fish that you're eating, but you can know that it's been sustainably sourced as well.
Right.
So the use cases are starting to come out at endless. The PhD hat on me, though, says, and a lot of skeptics will always say, is blockchain just looking for a problem to solve?
Right.
And that does happen. Sometimes I think there are more cost-effective ways to solve a problem than using a blockchain solution. You can overcook it in that regard, but it has some really neat, sexy use cases that are out there.
Yes, right. And do you believe that it's obviously a big part of right now, and it will be a big part of our future? Do you think it's going to impact, I guess, the role of the business analyst, or who I guess adopts blockchain or upskills to understanding, well, how can our organization use blockchain to help us improve our processes?
I've been around the traps for a while, and we caught up in our last conversation, which was great, where I shared a little bit about the fact of my career, right? I started a while ago, I won't disclose my age, but quite some time ago when, I was often the first business analyst in an organization. And even though while I was one of these people that at 16 years of age decided, yes, I wanted to be a business analyst, and that's what I wanted to be when I grew up, it was still quite a newish role, right? So when people would go, I need some tech solution, they would often go straight to a developer. And you would cross your fingers that you had one of these wonderful unicorn developers that could easily understand your business requirements to translate that technically and actually get that correct.
Right.
So I'm seeing that quite significantly in the blockchain space, is that a lot of all the startups and the meetups that I go to have a tendency to be quite tech heavy, quite developer heavy. So it is those super unicorn developers out there that know how to speak business as well, but soon they will have to choose, because it will get popular. Their capacity will be stretched. So they will need, sadly, the salespeople to go out to do the sales pitch, and they will also need a PM or a product manager or whatever they want to call them to help shape and scope the project, and they will need business analysts. So I think it's still, as I said, 2008, 2009 was when Bitcoin came about, and that wasn't, you could execute what are called smart contracts on the Bitcoin blockchain at that time, quite simplistic ones though. However, with the advent of Ethereum, which has a more complex and robust programming language in that came about in 2015. So, we're 2020, we're 5 years in, BAs are going to start getting busy, start getting informed about business process around, just because you've got to fundamentally think sometimes of the problem in a whole different way.
Right.
If you want to go down that space.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's, that's a challenge for a lot of organizations, is thinking differently or creating the future, innovating. Because, I think a lot of organizations, when they think about business process management or process improvement, they automatically think to, or I guess get attracted to their current pain points, their current problems. How can we tweak our current processes? How can we improve that same process? But if that's where all of the attention lies, who's going to be creating the future? If your organization isn't creating the future, there is another organization out there that is going to create the future, and you're going to have to play catch up and potentially be left behind if you can't keep up with that future that someone else is creating. So what's one of the biggest challenges that you see an organization facing when, I guess, adopting blockchain? I guess there needs to be that understanding around what is it and what can it do? Do fundamentals need to be put in place before organizations dive into technology like this?
Yeah, again, it's a good question, and really tough to succinctly answer that. So interestingly, for me at the moment, I'm lucky enough to be invited to participate in what is called the RegTech working group, that we will be presenting hopefully reports early next year in relation to the national blockchain roadmap. And of course, there is four working groups that are currently working on a range of fintech, regtech, credentials. So that's in the identity space. And one other that slips my mind. And certainly one of the hurdles that they're talking about that they're finding as startup companies is more about our regulatory environment itself.
Right.
So a lot of these startups are looking at the fintech space, and they do want to challenge and go, okay, for example, they want to do ICOs.
Right.
Whereas we're quite heavily protected. We have quite a lot of rules when it comes to IPOs, so initial public offerings.
Yes.
You have to do a lot of reporting. You have to give, your balance sheets, your profit and loss statements, and people are trying to shortcut processes by doing ICOs and trying to raise funds. But the reason why these regulations came about was to protect consumers investing in fraudulent offerings, right? And so you see that now. So there are fraudulent offerings out there. There are people that are hoping that, there's just vapor software out there, or someone's ICO out there saying, give me money. So they are out there. So you have to be cautious of that. And I think that's another caution to businesses, is they are out there, and sometimes you hear more about those, and that scares you off.
Right.
The other one for me is about education.
Yes.
And so while startups also say, the regulatory environment is prohibitive, I think sometimes it's a nice framework if you can work in a complementary way to the regulation. So, for example, I work in the regulation industry, right? Regulate and within Queensland around the minings and explosives and petroleum and gas industries. We have legislation, we have law that these guys and girls that need to comply with, right? We could turn that into a smart contract quite easily.
Right.
And then have all the industries reporting their incident management data, reporting into their credentials, tying that in with RTOs, proving their credentialing, making sure that we've got the right senior site officers with the right credentials, that they haven't expired, all those things. So you can do that. But again, it's that hurdle of understanding that still needs to happen. And it's hard enough in my industry at the moment trying to convince them that Microsoft Dynamics will solve some of their problems, let alone try to go, blockchain is the next thing. And that's change management 101.
Mm.
You know, it's they can only see and envisage what's they've seen.
Yes, that's right.
You know, so those to me are some of the kind of the bigger hurdles. I think one of the next hurdles, as we sort of hinted at, is how to, as an organisation, present the problem to tech people and developers and companies out there that are likely to partner with you in such a way that it encourages them and enables them to participate in that procurement process.
Yes.
So wording and giving quite heavily prescribed business requirements in a request for quote will often preclude blockchain companies from being able to successfully submit a bid.
Right, okay.
Because the way you might word something, you know, must comply with such and such, or, you know, and you're like, well, hold on here a second, this is something completely different. It doesn't work that way.
Right.
And so sometimes they can be really, they can fall short, unfortunately.
Yes, okay. And I guess that the the executives and the senior leaderships that will ultimately call the shots and make the decisions and hold the purse strings, so to speak. Yep. Moving forward into the future, you know, they're the ones that are going to the ones that will need to be convinced for an organization to adopt something like blockchain for, you know, the way they improve or innovate their processes. And I think, you know, it'll probably attract those leaders that are ambitious and do want to create the future and do want to, I guess, pioneer in their industry. Whereas there's probably going to be more organizations that take a back seat, observe like everything unfolding, and then jump on once it's proven many times over.
Yeah. And look, that's the way it is always. You know, you have the early adopters, you have the bleeding edge kind of people, and then you have the laggards. And you know, as Clayton Christensen has always said, there will always be those that will do the disrupting, and then there will be those that will be disrupted.
Yes, that's right. And for these people, you know, these senior leaders, the executives, I guess the question they have about anything they invest into is, well, what's the return on investment? How quickly am I going to realize that return? How is it delivering value to the organization? And how does it tie into our overall strategic direction or vision? So do you have any, I guess to give you a more of a specific question around that, do you have any examples of wins that organizations have experienced by adopting blockchain and implementing it and seeing value delivered for their organization, even if it's not sort of specific, tangible like impact, but I guess similar to what you were saying before about the Tuna?
Yeah, I've seen some nice use cases, and my startup friends and colleagues will go, lobby for us, Karina, lobby for us, because they are at their wits' end of, we need to end the proof of concept. Gone are the days that we stand up a blockchain solution and then you go, awesome, that was great, and then that's it.
Right. Yes.
Especially in Australia, super keen to sort of get a lot more production solutions out there. Mm-hmm. But again, we do know of some amazing platforms. For example, of course, Hyperledger Fabric is out there. So that's IBM's solution, Ethereum. These are all platforms on which companies can build applications. Mm-hmm. One of the best and brightest, in the sense from a Brisbane base for me, is Leanne Kemp. She is the CEO of Everledger and founder. She has just up till recently held the position of our Chief Entrepreneurs Officer role within the whole of Queensland, and going around and sharing that. Now, the company Everledger started as a blockchain company focusing on traceability and provenance of diamonds.
Right.
So that's always a nice hot topic. It doesn't necessarily, I've got a diamond on my hand, and I go, well, I hope it's not blood diamonds. Do I care? Well, of course I do. But yeah, they've been working with many of the top diamond trading companies, and they are then putting all their diamonds on the blockchain. I know there for a while that they struggled with getting De Beers on board, and De Beers went, we've got this amazing technology, we track all our diamonds with this special encryption, blah, blah, blah. But now De Beers are looking at their own blockchain solution as well. So that's one of the amazing little use cases that are, well, I wouldn't say little, she's a worldwide UK-based company now, and they're expanding beyond that as well into areas, I believe, of art as well. So that,
right.
Once you've got that right, once you've got identity nailed, once you've got your framework and your consensus, what you can then utilize and leverage it for makes it a little bit easier. So tracking and tracing and provenance is then the consistent workflow.
Yes, right. And for someone listening right now that, maybe this is the first time they're learning about blockchain, or maybe they have heard about it before, but they're learning what does that practically look like for an organization? Like, what does blockchain look like, not just in theory, but how does it deliver value and I guess deliver results for that organization to the strategic direction? Yeah,
I think the one another nice little use case that I know of is Lindy Chen, I think was her name. Was it Cindy? My apologies, I'm the most worst person when it comes to name. But she shared with the IEEE group about a couple of months back now, when we were allowed to get together, and she shared a use case about a bill of lading. So she does a lot of work with our Chinese partners, and of course sometimes there are issues around goods received is not what a goods ordered. So the use case that she shared was about the person had ordered copper and they received bags of sand. Now the cost of actually investigating that and proving that with screeds and documents, and I don't know if you've ever shipped anything overseas and have to fill in the bill of ladings and what's in what boxes. Imagine that on a large shipping scale with what on ships, all that sort of thing. So when you think of it in that way, you can actually get huge efficiencies on that. A single place, you're not having that tension between the shipping company, the port company, the sharing of documents. This is trying to create one open public ecosystem that allows all parties to participate on quite freely.
Yes.
Rather than that ERP system needing to talk to that ERP, and them having to have a conversation to go, what language do we need to speak? Oh, mine's Oracle, mine's SQL. Oh, sorry, I've got Lotus Notes. All those sort of fun things and tensions, if you build that one ecosystem that all parties can participate on, then there's huge efficiencies in that regard. But the bigger benefit comes in not necessarily the intentional fraud, but you can actually easily prove that, I got sand, not copper. Yes. And then you can get the remediation for that back a lot easier. Yeah.
Right. And in traditional business process management, I guess you could say when implementing improvements or changes, you've got to be working with the process practitioners or the frontline employees that are carrying out the processes, that are doing the tasks and activities, that are picking up the phones, making the calls, that are in the warehouses or factories doing the tasks that need to get done. And I guess the BPM specialist or the manager or the team, they need to work with them to get that buy-in, so that you come up against as little resistance as possible, as fewer objections as possible.
Yeah.
When bringing blockchain into an organization, obviously you need to sell the idea to that executive level, the senior leadership, but I would imagine you also need to get buy-in from the people whom you're changing their day-to-day work, whether it's something they've been doing for the last 5, 10, 15 years, and you're actually bringing it onto the blockchain, or, in whatever way that could look like. But what does it look like to, what would it look like to bring those people on board for the journey? So, you have as least resistance as possible, and they understand that, no, this is good for the organization. This is delivering value, and we're moving into the future.
Tough question, that one, especially in that space. Going through a transformation piece of work in a project myself right now, it's interesting because we have this tension, right? Whereas we want to create quite a fundamentally new process. And when we bring people that are in that front facing, collaborating with them, sometimes their suggestions are still, they can't quite see a future, right? They know their immediate pain points, and sometimes you're quite leapfrogging away from their pain points because of the improvements that you can visualize. So sometimes it's about hearing but not taking on board. So that's why you bring on board awesome change managers as well, because in the blockchain space, sadly, you could see quite phenomenal disruption of people's roles in that space, because it will change inevitably. Something that, I know there's still people in organizations that will, check all the POs and do manual reconciliations with invoices and all that sort of stuff. And the reality is that they shouldn't have to do that.
Right.
Now, that can challenge some people. That's their job. They're happy with those types of jobs as well. And so then they go, well, what am I going to do? I'm going to need to upskill. Yeah. And the answer is yes, you're now going to have opportunities to do something different or expand your job role, or do, so it is very important that you manage that. For me, it's always people and process first. Technology is last. Technology is an enabler. And so being respectful of the impact that you can have on people's roles, livelihoods, and, the reality is that, it's as much as on an organisation's duty to help prepare our organisation for the future. If you look even like, for example, the mining industry, we've got some really well-paid truck drivers out there, and they're already looking at autonomous vehicles quite heavily within Australia. We're challenged, of course, now, even with the Chinese and the relationships there. So, we've got to be aware that some of these industries will be impacted by technology, not necessarily always just blockchain, but by technology, and we need to future-proof them as well.
Yes.
So learning blockchain is one of those ways that you can do that too.
No, that's good. Yes, I think that, the business landscape is evolving, it's adapting, it's changing at such a rapid rate. And I think that, you may not have been impacted 5-10 years ago, but maybe now your role is coming to a point where it's going to be dramatically changed, not just add another tool to the tool belt, so to speak, but completely different to what you know.
Yeah, I went to an interesting conference probably about 18 months ago now, which was led by Data 61 and CSIRO. And there was some interesting research papers that have come out there about the impact of technology on the worker. and it was interesting in the sense of their estimates on best and worst case scenarios of which roles will dissipate completely, which roles will be newly created because of the tech space, but also, what roles will change. So, for example, they talked about, the era of the photographer, right? So a photographer used to sort of be in their shop with the chemicals and all of that, doing their production prints. So the print side of things for us has significantly reduced. We're a lot more about the digital media, but their jobs have evolved now then to be more about video, potentially, live photos. What mechanism can we move, this photo into a kind of live photo as well? So that all those things are kind of evolving, changing and growing. So a photographer not out of a job, but there is always that human element side of things, that where do you add value is what you've got to figure out. Where do you add value into that part? And that's what you really need to hone in on, not something that could be easily replicated, automated.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, right. And for people that are listening right now, when you learn something new, that may not be the norm just yet, or maybe, I guess, when people don't understand it, sometimes there can be that fear around it of what is it actually. What is it exactly, and what does it actually mean? But for people that are listening to this and they're learning about blockchain, and maybe it has piqued their interest, and that it is something that they're going to be talking about, at the Saturday afternoon barbecue party, and also to their colleagues at work, and maybe to their manager and to people in their organization. What are some of the, I guess, the more common or frequent objections to blockchain, and how do you handle that? How do you not defend, but how do you provide, I guess, supporting evidence that, like, no, this is good, it's a good thing, it is the future, it's what's going to happen, and this is why?
Yeah, for me, it's, the notoriety that had come about because of Silk Road is probably one of them. Mount Gox was another one. So for the newbies that are listening, so Silk Road was an underground website for the procurement of illegal substances and things and people, and then that got seized by the FBI. Now, why that became such an infamous case was because a lot of people were using Bitcoin,
right,
to pay for those services and goods. And so then they seized a whole lot of Bitcoin. Now, what's so funny about that is that Bitcoin is traceable. So as I said, you have keys that identify the transaction, right? And they are linked, and then they get passed on. So, people have analyzed some of the Bitcoin transactions on and off chain and kind of gone, yep, I think it's that person, or I think, because our community is quite small, right? So we kind of know who the big fish are in the pond still, and who is spending the big bucks. So you kind of go, oh, why did they just dump that amount of crypto? Or so there, it's not kind of all secret cloaks and dagger. There are cryptocurrencies out there, though, that are especially for a little bit more privacy and security. So there are a few more that have that higher level of security and privacy protections there as well. So those tend to use that, but Bitcoin got famous for that. So yes, that's what you hear. And the other one, like I said, Mt. Gox, that was a cryptocurrency exchange. So if you ever wanted to participate in the Bitcoin network, you had to set up what was called a node and become a miner. And so what that meant is that you were using your computing power to do the computational solving of the puzzles to either earn cryptocurrency yourself, or you would actually participate in the validation of transactions that were happening on the network. Now that gave you, of course, then coins for doing that. Now, that was the way to participate or get into the network. But what has also started is there is places called exchanges. And they're just the same as how we have currency exchanges, where we give them our Australian money. They will give you back then cryptocurrency as your, and then you're sort of kind of within the network without having to run up a full node. Because I can tell you now, there's no computer in Australia that can mine or has the capacity to do cryptocurrency mining, right?
Right.
Some of the farms that are needed now to actually be in a space that is competitive to be able to be successful in mining a coin is just, well, I'm in a room here, but anyway, it would far in excess fill this room of asset cards and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
So that's the other sort of downside. Some people talk about, oh, well, Bitcoin and all of that is not very sustainable. You know, it uses the electricity of Denmark and all of those sort of things. And look, the reality is, yes, but that is the way it is because of the high openness and the trustless environment of which it operates in. So for a full open environment that is Bitcoin, blockchain, right, you need to have these checks and balances in place. And that comes at a cost to the performance and all that. However, so for example, another successful Australian company out there came from some wonderful academics down in Sydney as well, is called the Red Belly blockchain. Now that uses a whole different consensus algorithm, and that has the compute power. So if you think about it, Bitcoin is able to do between 2 and 15 transactions per second. So quite slow. When you think about MasterCards transact about 40,000 transactions per second. And so Red Belly blockchain is able to, I think they did it in labs, it was up to 600,000 transactions per second. So it's a blockchain that can handle Visa and MasterCard volumes of transactions, right? So, you know, when you have these objections, you have these struggles, but then you can easily talk to wonderful success stories, right? And that's what you need to bring up when you have those conversations. Say, hey, I'll send you a link. Here's this. The reality is there is scams out there. There are dodgy people. But the reality is before Bitcoin, there was Silk Road anyway, right? There were dodgy people doing dodgy things long before Bitcoin came around. You know, we've got some really famous people, you know, that defrauded a lot of people that caused the financial crisis in the United States. And that was all before Bitcoin, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's true. And as we move forward or look forward now to the future of, you know, organizations using blockchain, because I think, you know, again, for people listening right now, whatever level in the organization they're at, you know, I guess blockchain will matter to them when it's something that they're doing, every week or every month or every day, where it is impacting the work that they're doing. It is impacting the way their organization delivers value. So if we look forward to the next 2, 3, 5 years, obviously we're going to see a greater adoption of blockchain. What would you advise organizations to think about or consider as they move into the future regarding blockchain and what it can do for their organization?
So I had the opportunity of sharing a presentation stage with one of what I class as one of the really superstar developers within Brisbane, which is Lucas Cullen. And he and his presentation was about the 7 reasons why not blockchain. And first is you, right? I have an iPhone. It's protected. I have a password, but I have an escape clause in the sense of, if I have to reset my password or I forget it, I can press that forget password button, right? Or if I'm at my bank, I can go, oh, yep, I can reset my password. I can give them a few identity points and they will give me a new password. You don't have that necessarily. If I lose my private key for my crypto transactions, it's gone. Right? That's on me. So I hear some horrible stories of, wonderful people that have, printed out their private keys on pieces of paper, ripped them in half, put them in different places, and then realized when they've gone and tidied up their house that they went, oh yeah, that's a ripped piece of paper, and thrown it out. Yeah. So it can be a struggle in the sense of that by moving that trust, we put a lot of trust in a lot of third parties as individuals, right? Trust organizations. And just in the same way sorry. Let's decline that. No, they really want me. Okay, sorry. Didn't silence that quite. So back to that question, in the sense of there is that hurdle of it being us. So when it comes to organisation choosing that, they need to understand their user base, right? So in my research at the moment, I'm actually looking at the use cases and who and what are doing what. And I've been tracking them for over a year. I actually started in April 2018. And now I've done a new cut of my data in 2020 as well. So the industries, of course, that are right up there are, of course, IT and financial industries that are really exploring this space. But the reality is that I saw a use case in every single one of our industries.
Right.
Mining, construction, the 2 industries we really kind of don't often ever hear about being tech savvy, they're there. Arts and recreation, they were quite up high, which I thought was really interesting. Where they're talking about, I like that little use case because they were talking about ticket fraud, right? So think of going to a U2 concert and knowing that you've got a legit ticket. If you've bought it off a secondary site or anything like that, you could prove that it's actually a truthful ticket. So in that regard, it's kind of for organizations understanding your customer base, starting out at a reasonable size, because and my other side to my PhD is actually taking a lens of transaction cost economics on this. So basically, it's the theory of the firm, in the sense that an organisation and a firm will organise itself to be of a size and contain within it the processes that are the most cost effective and of value, right? Now, when you change that whole process flow and the price, it might mean that it's better to outsource, or, you know, it's better to completely insource that whole process where you used to use a trusted third party. So
Right.
organizations and their boundaries of what is their organization will change. So that's probably the first and foremost. Will you actually need to continue to trust a third party to do that when you could actually create a blockchain solution for that? So for example, Corda. Now, I have reservations because technically, by strict definition, Corda is not a blockchain in the same way as a Bitcoin blockchain.
Right.
But it is still a group. R3 is a consortium of financial groups, including the Commonwealth Bank of Australia and a number of other institutions that are looking at blockchain. And actually, you know, I think it was upwards of nearly 60 members within this consortium trying to actually think about the future of money and banking and settlement. And, you know, one of the fun projects that I worked at UQ was also looking at mortgages on the blockchain.
Right.
So there's lots. So to what organizations have to know, the reality is look outside.
Yes. Okay.
Right. Be making sure that you're looking, that you said, those startups, those little disruptors that are coming, that are trying to get funding, because they're trying to get funding earlier, but they will be going after your customers that you don't service.
Right. Right.
Because that's where they'll get their stronghold, and then that will just change the whole way, because people will go, well, I would actually rather work in that way rather than this old process.
Yes.
So look to your outside and potential competition, and then look internally, right? And then go, okay, who are my partners? Who do I need to bring within my company? And who do I need to put on my blockchain as a partner? So again, I talked about this use case when I went to Consensus in New York. They talked about, and I always get it mixed up, but it was a courier company, so FedEx, starting a blockchain company, and then being friends with DHL. So they were going, you know what, we're going to build one blockchain. We want all our courier companies on this blockchain tracing parcels. So it wasn't about necessarily their competitive advantage, but they were going to be the leaders in it.
Right. Right. That's very interesting.
Yeah. So I don't know, there's no easy answer for what does an organization have to think about. It's the same things they think about from a strategic perspective every day anyway. But the reality is that a federal government is investing quite a good sizable amount of money in these working groups, in our reports that we're producing for them, as well as actually, you know, putting up money for some pilots. And actually building some of these technology platforms. I think the first place we will see a lot of real solid blockchain solutions will actually be in government.
Right, right.
As well, because we are the government is the trusted third party to protect its citizens.
True.
You know, as Estonia, countries overseas have actually, you know, going to fully blockchain their governments.
Yes, right.
So, you know, unfortunately, Australia is still a little bit slow in their whole innovation blockchain space, and there's some countries that have just fully embraced it.
Yes.
We're not too far behind, though.
That's good to hear. Well, Karina, obviously, you know, we can only scrape the surface in I think it's been 45, 50 minutes now, but we can still only scrape the surface on everything that there is to explore when it comes to blockchain and how organizations should approach it. But I think, you know, for me, at least, I can't speak on behalf of everyone else yet, but because they haven't heard it, but for me, at least, I've certainly learnt a lot, and, you know, it's really challenged my thinking and got me thinking about, well, what does the future look like? And and we need to be prepared for it. We need to, are you going to sit back and let the future happen, or are you going to be part of creating that, or pioneering what the future does look like? So I think that for the people that will be listening to this, they are going to glean a lot. It is going to challenge a lot of the way people think. It's going to spark a lot of conversations, at the Saturday afternoon barbecues, as well as in their organization, with their colleagues, with their managers, with the senior leadership. So I just want to thank you on behalf of the Process Pioneers community for sitting down and sharing your knowledge with us today.
No, thank you for having me. It's I could talk underwater about blockchain for a while. And look, the reality is 3 or so years ago, I had no idea. I had a PhD supervisor that said, "Oh, have you heard of Bitcoin?" And I was like, "No." And then I started digging and started looking. And so that's all you got to do, is just start the journey. Yeah, there might be a few people who go, "Oh, you don't know what you're talking about yet." And look, I don't even feel like I've quite scratched the surface yet, and I'm kind of three and a bit years in now. So just start the journey is all I can say. So thank you for having me very much, Daniel.